The cosmic storm strikes Dr. Elena Vasquez felt the station shudder around her as another wave of cosmic radiation swept through the New Horizon research facility. The lights flickered, casting dancing shadows across the engineering bay where she worked. Through the massive viewing ports, she could see the storm raging outside. A brilliant display of charged particles and electromagnetic chaos that painted space in shades of electric blue and violent purple. New Horizon Station was humanity's greatest achievement in cooperative engineering. Built jointly with the Cathara, an ancient crystalline species, it represented 5 years of careful diplomacy and shared scientific advancement. The station itself was a marvel, combining human mechanical engineering with Cathara crystal growth. Technology, where humans built with metal and circuits, the Cathara grew their structures from living crystal that could adapt and evolve. Elena had been one of the lead engineers on the project, specializing in the interface systems that allowed human and Cathara technologies to work together. It had been challenging work, requiring her to understand not just mechanical principles, but also the organic way Cathara crystals responded to energy and intention. The storm had been building for days. What started as minor electromagnetic disturbances had grown into a full cosmic tempest, the kind that occurred maybe once every few centuries in this sector of space. The station's hybrid systems were struggling under the assault of radiation and energy fluctuations that seemed to target the delicate balance between crystal and mechanical components. Elena wiped sweat from her forehead as she worked at a diagnostic panel. The readings were getting worse by the hour. The Cathara crystal networks that controlled life support, power distribution, and structural integrity were becoming increasingly unstable. Where they connected to human mechanical systems, the interfaces were failing one by one. Through her communicator, she could hear the worried chittering of Cathara engineers throughout the station. Their language was musical, like wind chimes in a gentle breeze, but now those sounds carried undertones of distress and urgency. Emergency Evacuation Commander Zethara materialized in the engineering bay with the characteristic shimmer of Cathara teleportation. The alien's crystalline form caught the emergency lighting, refracting it into rainbow patterns across the walls. Standing nearly 8 feet tall, with a body that looked like animated quartz shot through with veins of silver light, Zethara was an imposing figure even in the best of times. Dr. Vasquez, the commander's voice resonated with harmonic overtones that Elena's translator converted to English. "We must speak immediately." Elena looked up from her diagnostic screen, noting the deep blue color that had crept into Zethara's usually clear crystal form. In Cathara physiology, that meant serious concern, possibly fear. "The storm's getting worse, isn't it?" Elena asked, though she already knew the answer from the increasingly frantic readings on her instruments. "Worse than our projections indicated," Zethara confirmed. The commander moved to the central display, where a holographic representation of the station showed system failures spreading like infection through its hybrid networks. "The cosmic radiation is causing cascade failures in our crystal matrices. Where they interface with your mechanical systems, the incompatibility is becoming critical." Elena studied the display. Red indicators showed failing systems throughout the station. What worried her most was the pattern. The way failures seemed to accelerate where human and Cathara technologies met, as if the storm was specifically targeting their cooperative engineering. "How long do we have?" she asked. "Our scientists estimate 6 hours before complete system collapse," Zethara replied. The evacuation fleet is already en route. All personnel must be ready for immediate departure. Alina felt her stomach sink. 6 hours to abandon 5 years of work, to give up on the greatest cooperative achievement between their species. What about repairs? Surely we can find a way to stabilize the systems. Zethara's form shimmered with patterns that Alina recognized as deep sadness. We have tried, Dr. Vasquez. Our best crystal shapers and your finest engineers have worked together for the past 18 hours. The fundamental incompatibility cannot be resolved under these conditions. The storm forces our technologies to reject each other at the quantum level. The truth hit Alina like a physical blow. The storm wasn't just damaging their systems. It was exploiting the very differences between human and Cathara technology that they had worked so hard to bridge. Every interface they had carefully crafted was becoming a point of failure. The evacuation ships will arrive in 4 hours, Zethara continued. All human personnel must be ready for immediate departure. The Cathara evacuation fleet will arrive shortly after. Alina nodded slowly, but her mind was already racing. 4 hours to pack up and abandon everything they had built together. It seemed impossible that their greatest achievement could simply be destroyed by a cosmic storm. Elena's choice over the next hour. Elena watched as her colleagues packed their essential equipment and prepared for evacuation. The other human engineers and scientists moved with the efficient urgency of people who understood the gravity of their situation. Dr. Chen from the physics department carefully secured his experimental data. Lieutenant Rodriguez from security oversaw the destruction of sensitive military equipment that couldn't be allowed to fall into unknown hands. But Alina found herself unable to start packing. Instead, she stood in the main engineering bay, surrounded by the diagnostic displays and control interfaces that represented years of her life's work. The hybrid systems were failing, yes, but she was beginning to see patterns in the failure modes that no one else seemed to notice. Alina, you need to start packing, Dr. Chen said as he passed through the bay carrying a container of quantum processing cores. The evacuation ships won't wait. I know, Alina replied, but she didn't move from her position at the central diagnostic station. The failures weren't random. There was a rhythm to them, a pattern that suggested the storm's effects weren't just destructive, but almost selective. It was targeting specific interface frequencies, specific points where human engineering philosophy clashed most directly with Cathara. Crystal growth patterns. Commander Zethara appeared again, this time accompanied by 2 other Cathara engineers, whose crystal forms showed the rapid color fluctuations that indicated intense discussion. Dr. Vasquez, Zethara said, the evacuation ships are requesting final passenger manifests. Are you prepared to depart? Alina turned to face the alien commander, her decision crystallizing in her mind. I'm not going. The 3 Cathara forms went completely still, their internal light patterns freezing in what Alina knew was shock. In the background, she could hear Dr. Chen drop something. I'm sorry, Dr. Vasquez, Zethara said after a moment. Did you say you were not departing with the evacuation fleet? That's correct, Alina replied, surprised by how calm her own voice sounded. I'm staying. That is impossible, one of the other Cathara engineers chimed in, their harmonic voice carrying overtones of confusion. The station will be uninhabitable within hours. The system failures will cascade into complete collapse. Alina nodded. Maybe, but I think I'm starting to understand something about the pattern of these failures. Something that might only be visible to someone who helped design the original interfaces. Dr. Chen approached, his face pale. "Alina, this is suicide. Even if you're right about the patterns, you'll be alone on a dying station in the middle of a cosmic storm. No one can survive that. Human survival capabilities have surprised us before," Alina said with a slight smile. "Besides, someone needs to try. 5 years of cooperative engineering can't just be thrown away because of one storm." Zethara's form shifted to deep purple, the Cathara color for profound respect mixed with concern. "Your courage honors both our species, Dr. Vasquez. But you must understand, if you remain, we cannot guarantee rescue. The storm may last for weeks or months. No ships can safely approach until it subsides." "I understand," Alina replied. "But I also understand these systems better than anyone. If there's a way to save the station, I'm the most likely person to find it." The argument continued for another 20 minutes, with her colleagues and the Cathara engineers taking turns trying to convince her to leave. But Elena's mind was made up. She had spent 5 years learning to think like both a human engineer and a Cathara crystal shaper. If anyone could find a solution to the crisis, it would be someone who truly understood both technologies. Finally, as the evacuation ships began docking with the station, Zethara accepted her decision. "Very well, Dr. Vasquez. We will leave you with emergency supplies and communication equipment. May the cries **. First night alone, Alina stood in the main observation deck and watched the last evacuation ship disappear into the storm. The Cathara vessels, with their elegant crystal hulls, had departed an hour earlier. Now she was completely alone on a station, designed to house over 300 beings. The silence was overwhelming. For 5 years, New Horizon had been filled with the sounds of cooperation, human voices mixing with Cathara harmonic communication, the hum of mechanical systems working, alongside the soft singing of crystal networks. Now there was only the occasional creak of the station's structure and the distant rumble of failing systems. Alina made her way back to the engineering bay, where emergency lighting cast everything in an eerie red glow. Most of the main power systems had failed within an hour of the evacuations completing, leaving her dependent on backup power that would last perhaps a week if she was careful. She activated her personal diagnostic equipment and began a systematic survey of the station's condition. The results were sobering. Life support was running on emergency systems that were already showing stress fractures where they interfaced with Cathara crystal networks. Power distribution was failing section by section as the storm's radiation continued to disrupt the delicate quantum balance required for hybrid systems to function. But as Alina worked through the night, studying failure patterns and system diagnostics, she began to see something that confirmed her decision to stay. The failures weren't chaotic. They followed specific patterns that suggested the storm was interacting with their hybrid technology in ways that were almost predictable. More importantly, she noticed that certain human systems were adapting to the failures in ways that suggested possible solutions. Where Cathara crystals were becoming unstable, human backup systems were automatically engaging. The pattern suggested that instead of trying to force the two technologies to work together as they had before, she might need to find entirely new ways for them to cooperate. Understanding the problem as dawn approached on the station, though, time had little meaning in the depths of space. Alina finally understood what was happening. The cosmic storm wasn't just random electromagnetic chaos. It was generating specific frequencies that resonated with the quantum signatures of Kithara crystal technology. But instead of enhancing the crystal's natural abilities, the storm frequencies were creating interference patterns that made the crystals reject any non-crystalline technology. It was like trying to play two different songs at the same time. The original hybrid interfaces had worked by finding harmonic frequencies where human mechanical systems and Kithara crystals could synchronize. But the storm was flooding the environment with competing frequencies that made harmonization impossible. Alina sat in her quarters, sipping recycled coffee from her emergency supplies, and considered the problem from every angle she could think of. The traditional approach would be to try to shield the systems from the storm's interference. But the radiation was too powerful and too pervasive for any shielding technology they had available. Instead, she began to think about the problem like a musician dealing with acoustic interference. When two instruments couldn't harmonize because of environmental noise, sometimes the solution wasn't to eliminate the noise, but to find new harmonies that incorporated it. What if she could tune the human mechanical systems to work with the storm frequencies instead of fighting against them? What if she could use the storm's energy patterns as a bridge between human and Kithara technology, instead of seeing them as an obstacle? The idea was revolutionary and probably impossible. It would require her to completely redesign the interface protocols that had taken teams of engineers years to develop. And she would have to do it alone, with failing equipment, while managing her own survival on a dying station. But as Alina looked around her quarters at the failing crystal lighting and listened to the growing irregularity of the air recycling systems, she realized she didn't have any choice. Innovation or death, those were her only options. The first, innovation. Alina spent the next several hours in the station's workshop, gathering equipment and materials. The Kithara had left behind some of their basic crystal cultivation tools, and the human evacuation had been rushed enough that plenty of spare parts and diagnostic equipment remained. Her first experiment was simple but crucial. She needed to understand exactly how the storm frequencies were affecting both human and Kithara systems. Using a combination of human spectrum analyzers and Kithara resonance sensors, she began mapping the electromagnetic environment throughout the station. What she discovered was even more fascinating than she had hoped. The storm wasn't generating random frequencies. It was creating complex harmonic patterns that seemed to pulse and evolve over time. More importantly, these patterns showed mathematical relationships that reminded her of the natural resonances she had studied in Kithara crystal technology. The breakthrough came when she realized that the storm might actually be similar to the cosmic phenomena that had originally shaped Kithara. Evolution. Their species had developed in a region of space known for its electromagnetic storms, and their crystal technology had evolved to work with those natural forces rather than against them. Working feverishly, Alina began designing new interface protocols. Instead of trying to isolate human mechanical systems from the storm's influence, she would tune them to resonate with the storm frequencies. Instead of fighting the interference between human and Kithara technology, she would use the storm as a translator, a common language that both technologies could understand. The first test was with a simple power coupling in her workshop. Alina carefully adjusted the mechanical resonance frequency of a human power relay to match one of the storm's harmonic patterns. Then she connected it to a small Kithara crystal matrix that had been left behind. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the crystal began to glow with a steady, bright light that was more stable than anything Alina had seen since the storm began. The human power relay was not just feeding energy to the crystal, It was synchronizing with it in a way that amplified both systems. Alina sat back and smiled for the first time in days. It was just one small test, but it proved her theory was correct. The storm wasn't the enemy of their hybrid technology. It could be the key to making that technology better than ever before. Now she just had to scale the solution up to save an entire space station before her life support systems failed completely. Building Bridges Lena's success with the small-scale test filled her with renewed energy. But she knew the real challenge lay ahead. Scaling up her harmonic interface solution to save the entire station would require precision, creativity, and more than a little luck. She began by mapping the station's critical systems in order of priority. Life support came first, obviously, followed by power distribution, then structural integrity, and finally the communication systems she would need to call for help when the storm subsided. The life support system was the most complex challenge. It required dozens of interface points between human atmospheric processors and Cathara crystal air purifiers. Each connection point was now failing as the storm's frequencies caused the two technologies to reject each other. Alina started with the Central Air Processing Unit, a massive chamber where human mechanical fans and filters worked alongside Cathara crystals that could break down carbon dioxide at the molecular level and generate fresh oxygen. The system had been a masterpiece of cooperative engineering, but now it was dying as the crystals became increasingly unstable. Working carefully, Alina began installing harmonic resonators at each interface point. These were devices of her own design, combining human oscillation technology with Cathara crystal resonance principles. Each resonator was tuned to match specific frequencies from the storm, creating a bridge that allowed human and Cathara systems to synchronize through the electromagnetic chaos. The work was exhausting and dangerous. Alina had to crawl through maintenance tunnels filled with failing crystal networks that sparked with unstable energy. She worked in the dark to conserve power, using only a small headlamp that cast eerie shadows on the crystal formations growing from the tunnel walls. After 6 hours of continuous work, Alina activated the modified life support system. For a terrifying moment, nothing happened. Then, gradually, she heard the familiar hum of atmospheric processors coming back online. The air in the tunnel began to move again, carrying the clean, slightly ozone scent of properly functioning life support. But this was just the beginning. Alina had proven her concept worked on a larger scale, but she still had to modify every major system on the station before her emergency power supplies ran out. Power crisis. The power grid was Alina's next target, and it presented unique challenges. The station's hybrid power system drew energy from multiple sources: human fusion reactors, Cathara crystal batteries that stored cosmic radiation, and solar collectors that worked in both visible and exotic spectrums. The storm had not only disrupted the interfaces between these systems, but also overloaded the Cathara crystal batteries with chaotic energy they couldn't process. The crystals were now more of a liability than an asset, threatening to explode if their energy levels continued to climb. Alina realized she needed to completely reconceptualize how the power systems worked together. Instead of treating the storm as an obstacle, she decided to use it as an additional power source. Working in the main power plant, she began installing harmonic collectors of her own design. These devices could capture the storm's electromagnetic energy and convert it into usable power, but only if they were perfectly tuned to the storm's changing frequencies. The breakthrough came when Alina realized that the overloaded Cathara crystals could serve as frequency analyzers. Their natural resonance properties allowed them to track the storm's harmonic evolution in real time. By connecting human adaptive control systems to the crystal frequency sensors, she could create power collectors that automatically tuned themselves to match the storm's changing patterns. The first test nearly killed her. When Alina activated the harmonic collector prototype, it drew so much energy from the storm that it overloaded every safety system in the power plant. Sparks flew from control panels, and the crystal formations in the walls began to glow white-hot. Within seconds, the adaptive systems kicked in, automatically adjusting the power flow to safe levels. The station's lights flickered back to full brightness, and Alina could hear systems throughout New Horizon coming back online as stable power flowed through the grid for the first time since the storm began. Alina leaned against a control panel, exhausted but triumphant. She had not only restored power to the station, but actually increased its total energy output by incorporating the storm as an additional power source. Life support challenged with power restored. Alina turned her attention to the more complex life support systems. Air recycling was working again, but water processing, waste management, and temperature control all required their own solutions. The water recycling system presented a particularly interesting challenge. Human mechanical filters worked alongside Kythera crystals that could purify water at the molecular level, removing impurities that conventional filtration missed. But the storm's interference had caused the crystals to become selective, rejecting some molecules while allowing others to pass through in unpredictable patterns. Alina spent hours studying the molecular selectivity patterns, trying to understand why the crystals were behaving inconsistently. The answer came to her while she was taking a break, sitting in the station's hydroponics bay surrounded by the earth, plants that had been part of the cultural exchange with the Kythera. The crystals weren't malfunctioning, they were evolving. Under the influence of the storm's complex electromagnetic patterns, the Kythera crystals were developing new molecular recognition capabilities. They were becoming more sophisticated, able to identify and process compounds that had been beyond their original design parameters. Instead of trying to force the crystals back to their original specifications, Alina decided to work with their evolution. She modified the human filtration systems to complement the crystal's new capabilities, creating a water processing system that was actually superior to the original design. The same principle applied to the other life support systems. Everywhere Alina looked, she found that the storm's influence was causing the Kythera technology to evolve and adapt. Her job wasn't to fight that evolution, but to help human systems evolve alongside it. The discovery 3 days into her solo mission, Alina made a discovery that changed her understanding of everything that had happened. While working on the station's sensor array, she detected something unexpected in the storm's electromagnetic patterns. The storm wasn't natural. Hidden within the chaotic energy signatures were mathematical sequences that could only be artificial. Someone or something had created this cosmic tempest, but why? And who had the technology to generate electromagnetic phenomena on such a massive scale? Alina spent hours analyzing the data, using both human cryptographic techniques and Kythera harmonic analysis to decode the hidden patterns. What she found shook her to her core. The patterns contained star charts, mathematical proofs, and what appeared to be technological specifications. It was a message broadcast through the storm's electromagnetic chaos, but encoded in a way that could only be understood by a civilization that had mastered both electromagnetic manipulation and harmonic resonance. As Alina studied the message, More deeply, she began to understand its purpose. The storm had been designed as a test, a way to identify species that had achieved true technological cooperation. The chaotic frequencies would destroy any civilization that relied on a single technological approach, but a species that had learned to bridge different technological philosophies could use the storm to achieve new levels of advancement. The message contained coordinates to a distant star system and an invitation to join what it called the Harmonic Collective, a galactic community of species that had achieved technological synthesis. Alina realized that humanity and the Kythera had been evaluated, and their cooperative efforts on New Horizon Station had marked them as potential candidates for this galactic community. The storm was their entrance exam, and by learning to use it as a bridge between technologies, Alina had passed the test. Full system integration, armed with her new understanding, Alina threw herself into completing the station's reconstruction. With renewed purpose, she wasn't just trying to survive anymore. She was preparing humanity and the Kythera for their introduction to a larger galactic community. Working with almost superhuman energy, Alina redesigned every major system on the station. She installed harmonic resonators throughout the structure, creating a network that allowed human and Kythera technologies to communicate and cooperate in ways that had never been possible before. The station's computer systems were integrated through harmonic interfaces that allowed human digital processing to work seamlessly with Kythera crystal consciousness. The result was a hybrid artificial intelligence that combined human logical analysis with Kythera intuitive pattern recognition. The structural systems were redesigned to use the storm's energy for active reinforcement. Instead of simply withstanding stress, the station's hull could now adapt and strengthen itself in response to external forces. Most remarkably, Alina discovered that the integrated systems were becoming self-improving. The combination of human adaptive programming and evolving Kythera crystals created technologies that could modify themselves to become more efficient and capable over time. By the end of her first week alone, New Horizon Station wasn't just functional. Again, it was more advanced than it had ever been. Alina had created the first truly integrated human Kythera technology, a synthesis that was greater than the sum of its parts. The return Alina was working in the engineering bay when the alarm sounded. At first, she thought it was another system failure. But then she realized what she was hearing. Proximity alerts. Ships were approaching the station. She rushed to the observation deck and looked out into space. The cosmic storm was still raging, but through the electromagnetic chaos, she could see lights approaching. Multiple ships, both human and Kythera designs, were navigating through the dangerous conditions. Alina activated the communication system, which was now powerful enough to cut through the storm's interference. New Horizon, Station 2, approaching. Vessels, this is Dr. Alina Vasquez. I'm reading multiple ships on approach. Please identify yourselves. The response came in both English and Kythera harmonics. Translated through her improved communication system, Dr. Vasquez. This is Admiral Harrison aboard the UES Endeavour, accompanied by Commander Zethera and the Kythera rescue fleet. We're here to evacuate you from the failing station. Alina smiled. Admiral, I appreciate the rescue effort, but the station isn't failing anymore. In fact, I think you're going to want to see what we've accomplished here. There was a long pause before Admiral Harrison's voice came back, filled with confusion. Dr. Vasquez, our sensors showed complete system failure over a week ago. How is that possible? It's a long story, Admiral, but I think it's one that's going to change everything for both our species. New understanding, the docking of the rescue fleet was unlike anything Alina had experienced. The improved harmonic interfaces she had installed allowed the visiting ships to connect with New Horizons systems in ways that enhanced both the station and the vessels. Admiral Harrison, a stern woman in her 50s who had overseen the original construction of New Horizon, stood in the main engineering bay with her mouth open as Alina explained what had happened. Beside her, Commander Zethara's crystalline form shifted through colors that Alina recognized as wonder and disbelief. "You're telling me," Admiral Harrison said slowly, "that you not only repaired the station, but actually improved it by incorporating the storm into the systems?" "More than that," Alina replied, gesturing to the displays showing the station's enhanced capabilities. "I discovered that the storm wasn't natural. It was a test designed by an advanced galactic civilization to identify species ready for technological synthesis." She showed them the decoded message, the star charts, an invitation to join the Harmonic Collective. Both human and Cathara officials studied the data with growing amazement. Commander Zethara's harmonic voice carried overtones of awe. "The mathematical elegance of this message suggests technological capabilities far beyond either of our species. If this is genuine, it represents an opportunity for advancement beyond our current understanding." Admiral Harrison nodded grimly. "It also represents potential danger. Any civilization that can generate cosmic storms as communication tools is incredibly powerful. We need to be careful about how we respond." Alina understood their caution, but she also felt the excitement of discovery. That's exactly why the test was designed this way. They're not looking for species that are just technologically advanced. They're looking for species that have learned to cooperate, to bridge differences and work together. That's what made it possible to decode their message and pass their test. Over the following days, as more ships arrived to study Elena's innovations, the implications became clear. The storm had indeed been a test, and Elena's success in creating true technological synthesis between human and Cathara systems had marked both species as candidates for galactic citizenship. But more than that, Elena's work had demonstrated that the greatest achievements came not from any single species' technology, but from the creative synthesis that emerged when different approaches to problem-solving were combined. The Harmonic Collective's message had been clear. The universe was vast and full of challenges that no single species could face alone. But species that had learned to truly cooperate, to bridge their differences and create something greater than the sum of their parts, could become part of a galactic community working together to explore the cosmos and solve its greatest mysteries. As Alina stood in the observation deck of New Horizon Station, watching human and Cathara ships working together with unprecedented efficiency thanks to her harmonic interface systems, she realized that her week alone on a dying station had been just the beginning. She had not only saved the station and proven humanity's resourcefulness, but she had opened the door to humanity's future among the stars. The storm was finally beginning to subside, but Alina knew that the real adventure was just beginning. Somewhere among the distant stars, an entire galactic civilization was waiting to welcome humanity and the Cathara into a community of cooperation that spanned the cosmos. And it had all started with one human engineer who refused to give up, who chose innovation over evacuation, and who proved that the greatest achievements come from building bridges rather than walls. Asterisk.